What's going on, guys? Illegal Defense, episode 17. Gonna get straight into some NFL action. We have the first game that we have is the Eagles versus the Cowboys. Eagles went to Dallas and they lost 34-40. What was your takeaways away from this game, and how did you think the Eagles performed?
This was a great game. Christmas Eve night. All eyes on football this day. We had no NBA games. NFL took advantage, stacked the pretty much, stacked the um, television networks with tons of games this day. Eagles Cowboys was kind of the marquee game, even though it wasn't the night game. But it worked out just fine. Was a great game, even without Jalen Hurts obviously going through some injuries and having to sit out this game. Uh, Look, we know we've been talking about the NFC East all year, how good of a division it is, how competitive it is. These are the two teams with the better records in this NFC East, and they didn't disappoint. Micah Parsons was talking a lot before the game. We had the whole Gardner Minshew, who played pretty well in past teams, get his shot to step up and see what he's made up of and run this Philadelphia offense. Back and forth game, close game. I liked what I saw from the Eagles. I think if you're the Eagles, it almost worked out as in a weird way as good as it could, considering we talked about Jalen Hurts and the MVP talk, and what would happen if the Eagles just came out and smacked Dallas with Gardner Minshew. Everyone would say, "Oh, Jalen Hurts is it's not really Jalen Hurts; it's just a
It's the
team."
Eagles team, yeah.
In this instance, we see Gardner Minshew come in. He put up tons of yards. He was able to make some plays. There were some turnovers, but he played fairly well, and the Eagles hung around in this game. They didn't do enough to get the win. This was on the road at Dallas, though, a little bit harder than what it would have been if they were the home team and playing in Philly. And they come up just a little bit short. Um, it's something where it doesn't hurt the Eagles too much. They could go win this week and kind of put put Dallas, make sure Dallas keep them at bay and kind of try to lock up that first overall seed and the division. But yeah, so they still have time to do all that. But this keeps the narrative that Jalen Hurts is the MVP alive, which I think is probably more beneficial than if they. Well, I don't know if it's more beneficial, but I would say it's probably overall a more positive thing. I mean, the thing is, I don't think you ever would want to say that you would want your team to lose per se,
Right.
but to lose a game like this without your starting quarterback, it doesn't really hurt you. In fact, you could argue that since that it was a close game and they fought hard and it was close on the road without your leader, it's something that the rest of the team can use and rely on in other situations down the road in the postseason. So I think overall it went pretty well for the Eagles. Obviously for the Cowboys, they were able to hang in there. They were down at times. They kept fighting. They stayed in it. They were able to make some plays and they were able to come away with the win late in this game. Like we said, back and forth game. Great game all around, fun to watch, and the Cowboys come out top. They kind of they needed the win to stay in contention, but it's kind of one of those things where they're mathematically not out of it, but they're probably not getting the they're not going to get the number one overall seed
Right. The division.
or the divisional. So
It's something that you could look forward to in the playoffs too. A
right,
possible playoff
right, and
matchup
so for
where
Cowboys, they can use it as okay. We look what we did to this team. We came in and we beat them. It's a little bit hollow in terms of you didn't have Jalen Hurts out there,
right,
right? So that's why for the Eagles, it's like losing this game. If they had Jalen Hurts, it'd be like, oh man, we played a tough game against them. They beat us last time. We got to get them this time. But in the
yeah,
back of your mind, you know that they beat you before. In this case, it almost doesn't count as a real loss, like philosophically in your mind, because
you
you
don't
yeah,
you
you were
know this,
playing with a disadvantage.
right?
Things weren't all equal. Everything isn't how it's supposed to be. hopefully, if these teams were to play again in the playoffs, Jalen Hurts
And
and the rest of the Eagles and the rest of the Cowboys,
yeah,
everyone's healthy or as healthy as can be, and you take in your best players and you do what you can do. So, but yeah, still, look, you can't take anything away from the Cowboys. Look, they're the home team, but it was a solid win. Eagles, one of the best records in the league for a reason, and we saw why, even with a backup quarterback, what they're able to do. Gardner Minshew, as we talked about, he's no slouch either.
yeah,
He's a guy that, had the Jags not been able to get Trevor Lawrence, he might still be there as the starting quarterback.
right.
So yeah, all around a pretty good game, and one that, like you said, will be able to potentially see a rematch come
In
playoff
the
times,
playoffs.
which a game like this sets up a pretty nice narrative going forward, because if that game were to happen, we get to come back and look at this game. Oh, well, it was a tight game before. Oh, well,
Yeah.
they were at Dallas this time, and now they're going to be in Philly. Oh,
And
well, the Eagles
two,
have Jalen Hurts this time.
yeah, and
You
two
know,
starting quarterbacks because
right.
in last game they had Cooper Rush versus Jalen
Hmm.
Hurts, and now it was kind of the vice versa
Yeah.
situation. In the playoffs, you have the both teams in totality, which will be able to see the full potential of both teams. So
Right.
that'll definitely it'll definitely be good to see in the playoffs. If that does happen, if both teams are able to get that matchup going, but again, we don't know what can happen in the playoffs. Anything can happen. That's the beauty of the playoffs. So, with that being said, we're gonna move into our next game with the Giants versus the Vikings. Giants almost came away with the win, but they came up short, 24-27, and they fought a really good game. And with this game, I think what you can take away with this is Daniel Jones. I think he played great football. He was making a lot of great passes, a lot of good positive things leading into the playoffs. Um, Obviously they didn't win against the Vikings, but 24-27, that goes to show that you can compete with top tier teams and you can compete with other teams in the playoffs. So
Yeah, and so, look, the Giants, they played well enough. I mean, they're going against a Vikings team that I don't know if preseason, if we went back in time and looked at what people said about the Vikings, I don't know if people would all say that they saw the Vikings being here, with
right.
this type of record at this point. That being said, they've played great all season. Their record reflects that. The Giants are a team that certainly surprised a lot of people. I think they overachieved in terms of expectations, and this was a game that you know I thought they could win, but I didn't necessarily expect them to win. So losing a close one, it's not surprising, but it's almost like a I don't know, almost like a moral victory that they were barely,
Close enough.
they were just short.
Right.
Because look, they're a team that's not supposed to be here, right? You could say in some ways the Vikings aren't supposed to be where they are too, but they're not supposed to be there in like a different level, right?
Yeah, and they have the talent. They
Yeah,
have
they have the
the talent
talent.
gap from
If you,
them to the
yeah,
Giants
if people
is
told, if people
significant.
said the Vikings were going to go to be a playoff team this year, nobody would blink an eye. That didn't seem out of the question. Them being as good as they are is the where they're at. The Giants are kind of, you know, the tier below that, where they were expected not to make the playoffs. Now they're looking like a playoff team, and so in terms of the overall current structure and feel around both of these football teams, it just seems like the Giants are at this moment in time just one tier underneath the this Vikings team. But we saw good things for both teams. Close game. Kirk Cousins able to pull out a win. Sometimes he doesn't get to do that. We see him kind of fold a little bit sometimes. So certainly a something that they could build on from there, especially this late in the season, rolling into the playoffs. The Giants close game against one of the better teams in the NFC. This is another game just like similar to Dallas and Philly. These teams can see each other in the playoffs. If you're the Giants, you can sit there and say, "Hey, we just played these guys. It was a close game. We could go out there. We could do a little bit better, and we could get the win." And if you're the Vikings, you could say, "Hey, we beat these guys in a close game. Let's play better. We should be able to beat them more easily." So, depending on how you look at it, you could draw some positives either way. That being said, for the Vikings, this is more a good win in terms of seeding,
Yeah.
right? This keeps them in contention for that number one overall seed. They pretty much locked up their division at this point, so it doesn't matter for that, but it does matter in terms of seeding. For the Giants, um, the loss isn't the greatest thing, but if they win this coming week,
They're in.
against the Colts, they're in the playoffs,
Yeah.
which is a huge win for a team that was so far back in terms of talent, putting the pieces together, and just running like a well-oiled machine and a good organization. So, yeah, the results of this game were that probably status quo for each team. They're both kind of still building at the same pace as they were before this game. And we'll probably be able to see both of these teams, certainly the Vikings, but probably the Giants as well, in the playoffs. And now it's just about getting into a rhythm, playing your best football as you head into the postseason to try to make a run.
Yeah. So with that being said, we'll get into the next game that we have marked up, which is the Texans versus the Titans. Texans actually took care of business, won the game 19-14, or against the Titans. And the Titans, what I took away from this game is that they have a really stale offense, and it's pretty predictable. And when you're predictable in the NFL, we see what happens. We've seen teams like, let's say, even the Texans, where it's like they don't really have much offensive weapons, and they were running through Damian Pierce the entire year. And once it got to the point of he was out, they kind of spread it out a little bit, try to get other things involved. But the Titans' identity is just run, 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 and they don't have any receivers that have that marginalized talent to make plays. They don't have the AJ Brown anymore. They don't have you could say Robert Woods, but I think he's kind of towards the tail end of his career right now. With the injuries that he's had, and that could obviously take a toll on any player, but tough game for the Titans. I mean, the Jags are up for winning this division.
Yeah, it's
So
it's kind of sad. Tennessee is a team that we saw them have not such a great start, right? We saw they started off the season with a loss to the Giants, which was a surprise to everyone. They go to Buffalo after that, get killed,
yeah, that game was
and then
slaughter.
and then kind of from there they kind of started turning things around. Mike Vrabel kind of got his guys ready to go. We saw Derrick Henry emerge and get back into the Derrick Henry that we know, and they started picking up some wins. They're in this very odd division with a bunch of teams that none of them are very good, but the Titans are probably it's very weird because they're very inconsistent to me,
Yeah,
but
yes,
they're
for sure.
more consistent than the rest of them. And so this should be a division that they win. It's disappointing to lose to the Texans when you just lost to the Jags already last week. And look, the Jags are surging kind of at this time,
Yeah,
so the loss is not as bad as it seems, but it hurts so much when you're this late and you are in the lead in terms of grabbing this division, and there's a pretty good chance they don't win this division at this point. Losing to the Texans, I mean, the Texans, we've talked about them before. They are a bad team, but they've been able to hang around close in a lot of these games. The difference is most teams, or just about every other team, has been able to finish them off late when they need to. And I guess it's probably has to do with what you said about them just being predictable, that they don't have the ability to kind of pull off that late last second comeback like we saw a team like the Cowboys make, or some other teams where you get into a slugfest with the Texans and then you just find a way to win the game. The Titans, they just couldn't find a way to win this game, and yeah, it's gonna be rough for them. They can still win this division, so they're still in it, but yeah, this is the last thing you want to do after a loss to the Jaguars last week, to give them the slight edge over you, is now go and lose to the worst team in football, who's also in your division, to give you another divisional
Division
loss.
loss. Yeah, that's the last thing
It's
you
just
need.
not a good recipe there. In terms of the Titans overall, I feel like they have to figure some things out. Like you said, they're pretty predictable. Ryan Tannehill out for the season. With Ryan Tannehill, at least he can make some timely plays. Almost, not talent wise, but almost timing wise, like Aaron, how we see Aaron Rodgers do sometimes, where he might not throw for a ton of yards, like in a season like this,
Right.
but he'll be able to rise up on certain occasions and be able to make the important third down conversions, the important read to get a guy open, to get some chunk yardage plays. They kind of lose that without Tannehill. Malik Willis, you would think, would be able to provide more um more headaches for opposing defenses, as a running quarterback can be used as a pretty efficient weapon. I mean, we see the Giants with Daniel Jones use that. I think the problem is his passing is just leaving so much to be desired that
Yeah.
teams don't really have to respect it at this point, and so they don't, and they could just load up and go after Malik Willis and contain him and try to get either sacks or hit him while he's running. And when your whole defense is kind of keyed in, and it's only either Malik Willis running the ball or Derrick
Derrick
Henry running the
Henry's.
ball, it's hard to make some things happen. So yeah, tough for the Titans to lose here. Good win for the Texans. It doesn't really do anything. They're still going to be at this point the first overall
First pick.
pick,
Yeah.
and yeah, I mean, like I said, doesn't do much for the Texans. Just a bad loss for the Titans here.
Yeah.